Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. 1, 2. It work? Okay. His arena. Channel 8. Okay. I'll start again, yeah? His Serene Highness, Ministers, Executive Director, Administrator, Executive Secretary, Ambassador, dear friends. A warm welcome to you all. The time to take action on coral reefs has never been more urgent. It has tremendous value to all of us, but yet has not been recognized to its full potential. So we need to take urgent action to mobilize resources in order to have climate resilient reef. The loss of coral reefs has been greater and the extinction than any other group of species. We're very happy to be here today as this marks the 1-year anniversary of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. It was exactly 1 year ago this innovative fund was brought together to unlock private investment for the benefit of climate resilient reefs, ecosystem and blue recovery as a whole. I now have the pleasure of inviting one of the funders, His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco. I will give you the floor. So, the hand sanitation? The hand sanitation? Oh, yes. Quick. Just to be proper.
Thank you very much, Mina. Monsieur le Ministre, Monsieur le Préfet, Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm delighted to see a project which I believe will bring a fundamental change come to fruition today. Halfway through this Congress, which is a sad reminder of the magnitude of the challenges facing us, it is refreshing to see efforts actually materialize, and with them the promise of progress. So I'd like to thank all those who made this moment possible, especially the French, German, and UK governments, the United Nations Environment Programme, the United Nations Development Programme, the Paul Allen Foundation, as well as BNP Paribas, and the Pegasus Group. And without forgetting, of course, my foundation, which has been working actively for many months toward the successful implementation of this fund. The Global Fund for Coral Reefs will enable us to engage changes because it will provide further resources to those who have been fighting for coral conservation for decades now. As we all know, these coral reefs, so fragile and of such importance, are currently under serious threat. The IPCC's special report on the oceans and the cryosphere, released in Monaco two years ago, was, I think, a sharp reminder. Ocean acidification, global warming, pollution, the causes of these threats are many and are particularly difficult to address as they're extremely diffuse and result from our entire development paradigm. However, we cannot and will not give up because we know that solutions do exist that will help us protect corals more effectively, to mitigate the threats hanging over them, and by developing scientific research to gain a better understanding of how and when and with who we can save them. These solutions are, of course, costly in terms of workforce, and of financial resources. Governments faced with other emergencies, other crises, and other pressures sometimes struggle to dedicate the necessary resources to such issues. That is why this fund will help us make valuable progress by mobilizing new resources and philanthropic foundations and involving states, financial institutions, and of course philanthropic foundations united by a common goal: coral conservation. It consists of two main vehicles. The first, based on traditional philanthropy, is dedicated to technical issues, as well as the appraisal and management of different initiatives. The second, more directly of a financial nature, is dedicated to mainstream investments in specific guaranteed projects, which will enable us to take concrete action for coral reefs, especially in developing countries. Thanks to this new type of initiative, we are aiming to renew the resources we have available for the environment. As such, this fund will target a wider range of issues, and in particular those related to ocean protection, which also need funding and which should also be able to raise the adequate amount of resources. Finally, this fund will provide us with an opportunity to define our strategies more effectively. And in the face of such a challenging and complex issue, the projections of the IPCC, whose seriousness I think is recognized by all, and which, as we've seen, unfortunately, very rarely makes mistakes, indicate that virtually all corals will have disappeared within a few decades. Faced with such a scenario, I feel it is also vital to devote part of our resources to ex situ coral conservation, as the Monaco Scientific Center has started to do with the World Coral Conservatory project. This type of initiative is essential to gain a better understanding of corals before it is too late. To identify corals it is possible to save and to have a chance one day of restoring coral reefs whose survival right now seems so uncertain. So for all these reasons, the Global Fund for Coral Reefs offers us, I think, an outstanding opportunity to look far ahead altogether. This is in itself a victory, one which I think we should welcome today and which I'm happy to share all together with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those excellent remarks, the leadership and the commitment to restore ocean health, and for throwing a lifeline to coral reefs ecosystems. I'd now like to introduce His Excellency, the Minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, who will be making his intervention in French. We will also have a translation for you in English. Thank you. So which channel would that be?
Merci. Monseigneur, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, cher Peter, Madame la secrétaire exécutive, chère Elisabeth, Mesdames et Messieurs, les récifs coralliens sont un véritable joyau qu'il nous faut absolument préserver.
His Serene Highness, Executive Director, Administrator, Executive Secretary, Ambassador, dear friends, coral reef are a treasure we must preserve.
Alors qu'ils occupent moins de 1% de la surface de l'océan, ils abritent près de 25% des espèces marines connues. Ils jouent donc un rôle essentiel au service de la biodiversité.
While they represent less than 1% of the ocean surface, they are home to nearly 25% of known marine species and are therefore an essential reservoir of biodiversity.
Et ces écosystèmes jouent également un rôle économique considérable. 500 millions de personnes qui vivent de la pêche ou du tourisme dépendent directement des récifs coralliens à travers le monde.
They play a considerable economic role. 500 million people worldwide depend directly on coral reef for food through fisheries. Income from tourism.
Les récifs coralliens jouent enfin un rôle à proprement parler vital dans la protection des personnes et des biens dans les régions côtières exposées aux impacts des règlements climatiques.
In addition, coral reefs play a vital role in protecting people and infrastructure in coastal regions exposed to the impacts of global warming, health.
Car pour ne prendre qu'un exemple, des récifs en bonne santé peuvent briser jusqu'à 97% de l'énergie des vagues avant qu'elles n'atteignent le rivage, ce qui réduit considérablement les inondations et l'érosion des plages.
Just as an example, healthy reefs can break up to 97% of wave energy before it reaches the shore, significantly reducing flooding and beach erosion.
Pourtant, ces mêmes dérèglements climatiques, vous l'avez rappelé, Monseigneur, il y a un instant, menacent les récifs coralliens.
However, such climate change threats are directly subject to affecting coral reefs.
Nous savons en effet de manière désormais certaine que les phénomènes de montée de la mer, du réchauffement de la température de l'eau et de l'acidification des océans dégradent les coraux, leur biodiversité et leur capacité de résilience écologique.
We now know for certain that rising sea levels, warming temperatures, and ocean acidifications are degrading corals, their biodiversity, and their ecological resilience.
Et le rapport spécial du GIEC est particulièrement édifiant sur le sujet, vous venez de le rappeler, Monseigneur.
And the IPCC special report is highly illuminating in this respect, as reminded by His Serene Highness.
Alors, mesdames et messieurs, 10% des récifs mondiaux se trouvent dans les eaux françaises. Notre pays a donc une très grande responsabilité à assumer dans la protection de ces écosystèmes.
So, with 10% of the world's coral reef located in its water, France has a great responsibility to protect these ecosystems.
Et c'est la raison pour laquelle le président de la République, lors du sommet France-Océanie, a rappelé l'importance que nous attachons à cet enjeu et notre engagement de protéger 100% des récifs coralliens de notre zone d'ici 2025.
And this is why the French president has reminding during the France-Oceania summit that France is committed to protecting 100% of its coral reef.
Au niveau international aussi, des engagements forts sont évidemment nécessaires parce qu'aujourd'hui, la protection des récifs coralliens pâtit d'un fort déficit d'investissement. À titre d'exemple, moins de 0,01% du financement climatique des banques de développement a été alloué aux récifs coralliens depuis 2010. Je dis bien 0,01%. Donc nous devons mieux faire.
So at the international levels, we need further efforts. Coral reef protections indeed suffers from a large investment gap. For example, less than 0.01% of climate finance from development banks has been allocated to coral reef since 2010. I repeat, less than 0.01%. So we have to do better.
Et c'est pourquoi je salue le travail du Fonds mondial pour les récifs coralliens, lancé l'année dernière par votre fondation, Monseigneur, et par la Fondation Paul Allen et les Nations Unies.
This is why I applaud the work of the Global Fund for Coral Reef, launched last year by the Paul Allen Foundation and the Albert Foundation and the United Nations.
Et je suis fier que la France rejoigne cette initiative avec une contribution de 3 millions d'euros pour prendre notre part à l'objectif de collecter et d'investir 625 millions de dollars dans la conservation des récifs coralliens au cours des 10 prochaines années, en mêlant financement privé et financement public.
And I'm very proud to announce today that France is joining this initiative and announcing a contribution of 3 billion euros to this fund, with the hope to invest get 625 million US dollars in coral reef conservation over the next 10 years.
Très heureux que Je suis aussi très heureux que la France puisse être associée dans le futur à la gouvernance du fonds et je suis convaincu qu'ensemble, nous pourrons relever le défi de la conservation des récifs coralliens dans le monde.
And I'm very pleased that France will be participating in the governance of the fund in the future, as together we can meet the challenge of conserving the world's coral reef before it is too late.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for that generous contribution and your commitment and France's leadership. Thank you very much. We will now move to hear from Inger Anderson, who's the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. So we will be joining us here on the screen. So if you kindly could play the video. Thank you very much.
A few weeks ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reminded us that climate change is here and that it spells utter disaster for the world's coral reefs. The world is likely to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century. Sea levels will continue to rise. Ocean stratification, acidification, and deoxygenation will continue to increase, and many of these changes are irreversible. As the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, has warned, coral reefs are particularly vulnerable to climate change and are projected to decline from between 10 to 30% of former cover at 1.5 degrees warming and to less than 1% of former cover at 2 degrees warming. Investing in the resilience of coral reefs is critical and long overdue. The Global Fund for Coral Reefs presents a huge opportunity for investments in saving this vital ecosystem. The fund brings together a diverse set of actors to roll out sustainable solutions to protect coral reefs. The first round of funding has supported countries including the Bahamas, Fiji, Kenya, Maldives, Papua New Guinea, and Tanzania in developing proposals to strengthen conservation activities. This includes investments in marine protected areas, locally managed marine areas, debt for nature swaps, improvements in sustainable small-scale fisheries and aquaculture, and ecotourism, waste management, and blue carbon projects. It is exactly these kinds of funding models that we need to multiply manyfold to support the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that countries must agree on in Kunming, China. Because we must make peace with nature. And an important element of our efforts to end biodiversity loss once and for all will depend on our success in curbing coral reef loss, one of the ecosystems most vulnerable to extinction. UNEP therefore supports submission of the International Coral Reef Initiative to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. By investing in coral reef restoration, the fund also supports the goals of the UN Decade on Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and the Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. By investing in nature-based solutions for carbon sequestration, such as the protection and restoration of blue carbon ecosystems or seagrass, mangroves, the fund is playing a critical role in tackling climate change. My thanks to the generous donors, including France, Germany, the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, the United Kingdom, and the Paul G. Allen Families Foundation. As we invest in the resilience of coral reefs and the healthy oceans we want and need, we must continue to address the triple planetary crisis of climate change, of biodiversity loss, and of pollution and waste. We have the solutions, and funds like the Global Coral Reef Partnership demonstrate that it is possible to generate the kinds of resources we need to secure nature and the benefit it brings for both people and planet.
So, thank you very much, Inger, and obviously we regret that you could not be here with us. I now like to thank, before handing over the word to Ambassador Thomson, also to say that the Global Fund for Coral Reef is really helping to leverage both the UN Decade of Ocean Science and the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. So that's an additional contribution, and I like the fact I highlighted the local communities part of this. Ambassador Thomson, I would like to invite you to give a few remarks. Thank you.
Take this moment to get my branding out there. Listen, folks, it's such an honor to have His Serene Highness here with us and the Minister from France. We're not used to such dignitaries in this little space here over the last few days, but having the Prince and the Minister with us really is a huge encouragement to us all in what we're trying to do for coral. So thank you, sirs, for coming. And thank you to the organizers for putting this together. Sylvie, I see you at the back there, Sylvie. Raise your hand when I've spoken for over 3 minutes, okay? It's difficult to shut an ambassador up when he's talking, especially when you come from Fiji like me, and you're speaking about coral, and you come from an island that is ringed by a mighty coral reef. Our existence belongs to the coral We would not have our towns protected if those mighty coral reefs were not there. The thought that they will not be there is unthinkable to us. We refuse that future. And yet the IPCC tells us at 1.5 degrees we're going to lose 70 to 90% of coral. And it tells us that at 2 degrees it's pretty much all gone. And that's not the worst of it. The World Meteorological Organization says that we are heading to 3 to 5 degrees within the life of my grandchildren. So this is an unacceptable future, and it is one which we obviously have to change, and that's mainly about altering humans' habits, and that's about going to Glasgow, lowering those GHG emissions from the major emitters in particular. So that's our job. From here, we go to Glasgow and we make the case. And we'll keep making that case until we turn the curve and we start seeing a strong future for coral. I want to just say a word of thanks to ICRI as well, to Indonesia, to the Principality of Monaco, and to Australia for having led ICRI in recent years. I believe there's a handover coming soon to the United States. Just to let them know that we're all in full support of what ICRI is doing. This is our world leader. And on the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, I can tell you that after 4 years of service as the special envoy, there are maybe 5 things where I see just great hope. And one of them is the Global Fund. You know, finally we're getting the kind of money into protecting and restoring coral reefs that we need. And I have already given my support to the fund's approach to the Green Climate Fund for $125 million from them. And I will continue to give that support, and in fact did yesterday in my meeting with the CEO of the Green Climate Fund. So folks, this is a great model for the future, not just for coral, for other things. You know, taking member states, combining them with philanthropies, combining them with impact investors, and in partnership addressing these existential problems that we have. So I can see Sylvia nodding over there. It must be 3 minutes. So I'll conclude on this, which is that you've heard my mantra, no healthy planet without a healthy ocean. And I would add to that, no healthy ocean without coral reefs. 30% of biodiversity of the ocean. So our future as a species is linked directly to coral. And we've got work to do. We can undo the harm that we have done. Let's get on with the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we continue the program, with excellent remarks from Ambassador Thomson, I know that the minister will have to leave. So if you could just rise and come up here, we'll take a quick photograph. Because as Ambassador Thomson said, it's a rare occasion, so we'd like to have you all up here and take the opportunity to take a photograph. Thank you. Yeah, if you stand in front of the podium, so you cover it. So, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we will now continue the program. We're now like to hear from Executive Secretary Elizabeth Marema. Sorry. Ambassador Thomson, we're continuing the program. We're continuing, Elizabeth. There. Yes, I did them. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Great. So a very warm welcome. As you can see, we have Elizabeth Maruma Marema online with us. She is the Executive Secretary of the Convention of the Biological Diversity. Thank you very, very much for joining us at this, well, it's not too early hour, but we would very much like to hear from you. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's always difficult to speak after the ambassador, but I will try. But let me begin first to sincerely thank His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco for all his continued support, not just to coral reefs, but I had been engaged with him those years in the past when I was in the Convention of Migratory Species, and all the support he personally used to provide for the migratory species. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as we all know, this is the critical time in the global policy landscape for looking ahead and visualizing what we want for the future of the oceans. Under the Convention on Biological Diversity, our parties, as you know, are currently developing the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which outlines the new global goals and targets focused on bringing the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Amidst all the discussions on ambitious goals, pathways to sustainability, and vision for the future, we often forget the most challenging part of the story, implementation. Of course, the Aichi biodiversity targets catalyzed impressive efforts to better conserve and sustainably use biodiversity. But in some areas, unfortunately, we moved away from the targets. The scale of challenges faced and the synergistic negative impacts of various pressures means that we need to scale up our efforts. Ongoing trends on biodiversity loss and the lack of achievements of the Aichi biodiversity target are not due to the problems in the targets themselves, nor in our understanding of what needs to be done. Primary reason is the failure to adequately translate these targets into on-the-ground action. Therefore, really pleased to see the development and evolution of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. As we all know, these fragile ecosystems often reside in some of the poorest parts of the world, underlining the need for more support if at all we hope to turn the tide for coral reefs. By aligning its work with the goals of the post-2020 framework, the fund can be a powerful tool for implementation, for tracking of progress towards global goals and targets for biodiversity, and for elevating awareness on our collective goals for the future with a healthy and robust coral ecosystem. Of course, post-2020 framework is just one piece of the global landscape and must be part of the holistic approach across the global processes, such as the climate change, as well as the World Trade Organization. Similarly, this fund will not exist in a vacuum. It needs to be built on the success stories and lessons learned from the world. I really urge and thank parties, donors, and all other stakeholders to take the best use of this fund to catalyze lasting impacts on the ground. We look forward to seeing how far this exciting initiative can take us. And as the ambassador said, there's no healthy ocean without the healthy coral reefs. And equally, without the healthy coral reefs, we'll never bend the curve for biodiversity loss. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for joining us there and sharing not only your wise remark, but also your enthusiasm and passion, and we can sense it all the way here. Thank you once again for excellent remark. You provided a perfect segue, talk about what it actually comes down to, its implementation on the ground. And we are now going to move to see some examples, and we hope that you can stay with us. Thank you. We're now going to see a series of videos that could really demonstrate how these programs work to implement it on the ground. So 2 are in development and 1 has been launched and it's ready. So we will start with the first video.
The Mesoamerican Reef coastline stretches for over 1,000 linear kilometers from the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico to the Bay Islands and coastal Honduras through the Caribbean coasts of Belize and Guatemala. The Mar includes the largest barrier reef in the Atlantic and is an integral component of an interconnected and transboundary system of coastal habitats that includes mangroves, seagrasses, sandflats, and lagoons. This ecoregion is the heart of a rich cultural heritage that includes Mosquito, Garifuna, Caribbean Creole, Quechua, Mopan, Yucatec Maya, and Mestizo. As with most of the coral reefs of the world, the Mar is facing several very serious threats, such as climate change, habitat destruction, pollution, and overfishing. If no action is taken, the tourism, commercial fisheries, and coastal development sectors in the region could lose up to $3.1 billion a year by 2030. Conversely, a shift towards healthy reefs could unlock $2.5 billion annually across the 3 sectors. But there is reason for hope. Recent studies have found the Mar to have the highest live coral cover compared to other regions of the Caribbean, including some of the best populations of critically endangered acropora coral and other threatened structurally complex coral species.
Mar-positive Invest is a blended finance mechanism that will support conservation, protection, and restoration of coral reefs and associated ecosystems through the development and financing of commercially viable projects that deliver coral reef positive outcomes through a mix of philanthropic, private, and government capital. The Mesoamerican Reef Fund, or MAR Fund, is a regional private environmental fund that operates as a planning and coordination mechanism. We drive regional funding and partnerships for the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of the Mar. Foundations of Mar-positive Invest are to grow a pre-existing emergency fund and increase the financial sustainability of protected areas and reef-dependent communities.
New Ventures is a pioneer and leader in building the Latin American ecosystem for impact investing. We have created financial products that serve the business in the missing middle and underserved markets and communities. For us, Mar-Invest represents an opportunity to serve coral conservation, a sector that has received very little attention from the investment community.
The Healthy Reefs for Healthy People initiative includes over 70 organizations dedicated to safeguarding the Mesoamerican reef. We developed the first coral reef health evaluation framework with report cards and eco audits that evaluate both the ecosystem health and the country's progress in managing it through science-based recommendations.
With a network of 127 innovators, the Mar Leadership Program is the largest network of change makers in the region. As part of Mar-positive Invest, we will enable new cohorts of leaders for market-based solutions to conservation that will include investors, donors, public policy officers, and other groups, with the goal of increasing the likelihood of sustained innovation and financing in the Mar.
Yes, a round of applause. Eco audits, I like that word. So that was an excellent example from Mesoamerica. And I would just want to say that all of these sites or the regional programs have been carefully selected, not just the sites, but also basically where there's strong community relationship, as that's one of the foundations. So there's all been developed in close collaboration with local communities. Now I'd like to see a second example We have 3 in total. So the second one is now for the regional program in East Africa, following Kenya and Tanzania specifically. So if we can roll the second video, that would be great. Thanks.
For over 70 years, WCS has been underwater studying and protecting coral reefs. Across 27 countries and all 5 oceans, we've seen firsthand the threats facing the world's reefs. Climate change, overfishing, pollution, and unsustainable development have left our oceans at a crossroads. What happens next is up to all of us. We have an opportunity to create a better future for coral reefs.
Hello, I'm Simon Cripps, the Executive Director of Marine Conservation for the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS. In January of this year, WCS were invited to submit a concept note covering the development of a sustainable funding pipeline for the conservation of coral reefs in Kenya and Tanzania's Trans-Boundary Conservation Area. WCS's teams in the Western Indian Ocean region, Conservation Finance and the Global Marine partnered to provide the local, financial and ecological experience required to run such a multidisciplinary initiative. This transboundary conservation area is ecologically critical because its unique topography, currents and ecology have recently been shown by our scientists to be a globally important climate refuge. It is one of those areas where, with effective, appropriate management and a reduction in stress caused by a range of threats, we can protect the coral reefs through a climate of rising temperature. These threats include unsustainable and damaging fishing practices, pollution, particularly plastics and wastewater, habitat degradation, coastal development and sediment runoff. WCS were then delighted to be offered the role of convening agent for this hugely important initiative. We are partnering with Okavango Capital Partners, Conservation Capital and a range of local and specialist actors in the field of conservation finance. Our vision, shared by the GFCR, is to use financial incentives and blended finance, including concessionary loans, loan guarantees, debt financing and equity-driven impact investment to unlock new capital to protect key coral reefs, either directly through reducing impacts or indirectly by funding conservation activities. These projects will need to have equitable outcomes for local communities and measurable benefits for coral reef ecosystems. This will be assessed before and during the project by our in-country teams. We are using a range of 8 carefully structured appraisal categories to assess opportunities and organise possible funding responses. The initiative will have multiple approaches, including the development of a venture studio to identify and incubate projects. We are hoping in the first phase of implementation to pilot 2 novel approaches out of the 5 main projects that currently are showing the greatest potential. Amongst these are a sustainable financing facility to innovate new projects and approaches, community plastic recycling in the Mombasa MPA area, empowering small-scale fishers, blue carbon in Kenya and Tanzania to protect and restore mangroves and seagrass, a marine aquarium at a major public beach. We believe that these and other exciting financial opportunities that will be identified by the pipeline will assist in changing the concept of funding coral reef conservation by moving support away from grant aid, other than in the early stages of initiatives, towards sustained funding as a result of coral reefs being accepted as an important and valuable element determining the future of nature and society in the region. With that, I hand you back to Dr. Nwira Mathiga, who runs our Kenya Marine Programme.
We're working toward a vision, a world where vibrant coral reefs teem with biodiversity, fortify shorelines against climate change, and remain a foundation for the communities and the species that rely on them. Join us.
Thank you very much for those excellent videos. Don't we all wish that we were there deep inside? And for the final video, something will feel very home to you, Ambassador. It's from Fiji. So if we can see that as a final example before we move into our panel discussion. Thank you.
Fiji has some of the most resilient reefs in the world. Under a 2-degree warming scenario, Fiji's reefs are the most likely to survive. These corals could be used to reseed reefs around the world that have died in 20 to 30 years' time. But if we don't stop the local anthropogenic threats, then these reefs will not survive. In Fiji, we have a problem. We have poor waste and pollution management. We have agricultural runoff. We have deforestation driven by agriculture. We have overfishing. We need to stop these issues if we are going to save our reefs.
These actions are causing damaging ripple effects that we are witnessing in real time that seriously threaten the survival of our coral reef systems and key marine species. My name is Natasha Morosi. I'm the Director of Conservation for Bang Adventure Divers and the Program Coordinator for My Fiji Shark. Our solution is to establish fully protected fish banks, allowing marine biodiversity to expand and to overflow.
My name is Jodie Smith and I work with Matanataki. At Matanataki, we work with private sector businesses who can bring about transformational change to the environment and to Fiji's reef systems. In Fiji, our waste has not been managed properly historically. Most of our dump sites, they sit on the coast. They sit on mangrove. We were walking on one of these dump sites earlier today, and it's basically a floating mass of waste.
That entire zone, that entire dump is actually floating in a marine ecosystem. My name is Paul Evers. I work for HG Leach and we run the only international standards landfill in the South Pacific on Fiji. The Vulavulesara project is a visionary project to contain, manage waste away from the marine ecosystem, away from the coastal areas. Vulavulesara will enable the recycling of 80% of that waste stream to recycle and upcycle materials, and particularly plastics, so they can be repurposed within Fiji and the Pacific.
I'm Sanjeev Chand, the founder of the Fertile Factory & Company and one of the directors of Waste Clear Fiji Limited. We will be replacing imported chemical fertilizer. We will be making a natural product using what is now considered waste. So the wasted opportunities, which is all the biomass, green waste, will be turned into a product that would be a natural fertilizer. And once we unite our farmers with our natural products, the impact, the devastation that has been caused by chemical runoffs from these fertilizers over decades on our reef system, slowly but surely we will turn that around.
We're able to bring government, the private sector, the general public, the communities, we can all come together, and of course the donors and the investors, we can all come together to solve the problem. I think this is something in the past that has been missing. Multiple stakeholders, innovative blended financing and local solutions. We haven't had this bigger picture approach, and this is what this program is providing.
Excellent. Very, very concrete examples, and I particularly like the last one, which has been developed already. I now like to invite up our dear panelists, speakers that I have in front of me. If you could just stand here, that's great. On the side, we will have time. So first, here to my right, Angelique Bradford, Director, Ecology and Management, co-founder of Blue Finance. Very welcome to you. I also have the pleasure of being joined by Maria Jose Gonzalez, who's the Executive Director for MARFund. please, the floor is yours. And let me see, if maybe if you stand over here, it's more appropriate because then I can look at, I can see you. Or no, okay, you can sit. You can actually have a seat. And lastly but not the least, we also have some other friends joining us here online, and we can see you, hope we can hear you. We have first to the left, you see Chuck Cooper, who is the chair for the executive board for the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. Very warm welcome. And in addition, Chuck is also the Managing Director of Governance, Community Relations at Vulcan. And I believe also here today you're also representing the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation. A warm welcome to you. Thank you for being with us. We also have the pleasure to have Craig Kogat, is the CEO for Pegasus Capital Advisor. Warm welcome to you, Craig. And he's also the Pegasus Capital is also the manager for the investment window of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. We're really pleased to have you with us. Thank you very much. So we thought we're going to have a bit of maybe 10 minutes or so before we close here to have a bit of a discussion, to ask you a few questions. I think we wanted to start by talking about how does the Global Fund for Coral Reef, using a blended finance model, I mean the structure, to mobilize mainstream capital to demonstrate viable revenue models that benefits reefs. Who would like to tackle that one? Should we start with our friends online, perhaps? Who would like to tackle this first? Craig, would you like to go first? Would you like to take that one?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think the videos illustrate very well all the innovation, all the science, and all the effort that's already been done to lead to investment in this critical area. So the Coral Reef the Coral Reef Fund is comprised of two windows: the investment window, which we'll manage, and then a grant window. We've talked about the generous donors, including His Serene Highness, and working with the partners, the types of partners, principally through the grant window that you've seen. We can identify projects, in some ways nurture them, figure out those that are best able to be scaled. Because these models, something that will work in Fiji may well work in another coral reef system. And it's to really work together with this network of partners, which the Coral Reef Fund, I think, has uniquely put together. And my congratulations to everyone like Chuck, who've been so instrumental in this.
Thank you very much. Chuck, would you also like to comment on that, in terms of how to mainstream mobilize resources into finance?
Yeah, when we originally envisioned the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, we were very much focused on the coral reef funding gap and the fact that we knew that governmental dollars and philanthropy was not going to be enough. So we thought, how can we use philanthropy and governmental money, funding, to catalyze private sector investment? And so that's what blended finance is, and that's the sort of mechanism that we chose to use. I think one thing that's really important about the Global Fund for Coral Reefs is, in some ways, blended finance is still being tested, and I think it has been used and deployed more frequently in the broader sort of development context. But in the context of conservation, I think we're one of the first funds that's attempting to deploy the model in this context. And so I think we see the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, in addition to having immediate impact on the communities that we're working with, also to have a broader purpose of being a demonstration fund. We want to be proving out approaches for investment and seeing what works and what doesn't work, both types of investment and then innovative finance mechanisms that we might deploy, seeing what works and what doesn't, and then really being deliberate about scaling those approaches.
Excellent. A demonstration fund. I really like that. So, I mean, if we talk, apologies, but we have some construction noise here in the background. Sorry about that. So could you, how about Angelique, would you like to, we need microphones. Can we have two more? We need to have one more.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Blue Finance, blended finance has been part of our model from the time we started 6 years ago. And as I was sitting here and listening to the speakers, I was thinking, you know, I'm hearing the same story. I've been in this business for a little while as a coral reef ecologist, and I've been hearing the same issues for like the past 30, 35, 40 years. The only thing that is different now and that has given me hope is the introduction of private sector finance in what we were doing before. Before we relied a lot on governments, we relied a lot on philanthropy, and it wasn't working. So what we're trying to do at Blue Finance, and we have received grant funding from the Global Fund, is actually try to build that sort of entrepreneurial spirit within the MPAs that we work with. We work with MPAs, we work at making them financially sustainable, and we do use blended finance not only to carry out the projects, but also to increase that capacity within the people who actually work in the MPAs.
Thank you. We are more of a newcomer to this sector. As was indicated in the video, we operate in the Mesoamerican Reef region, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. And currently, there are few sources of private capital to develop projects that can generate a revenue and can also generate positive results for the reefs and other ecosystems, mangroves and seagrasses. So GFCR is just an amazing enabler that allows the development of these projects that and provides grant capital, concessional capital, and commercial capital, and like in a one-stop shop, let's say, right? Because they're all integrated within that system, and that allows us to develop the projects, develop the initiatives, create the alliances, and even search for co-funding. So this is I see GCFR as an enabler for this type of project.
Excellent, thank you very much. But also, what type of innovative, like reef-positive business model can potentially be supported by the Global Fund for Coral Reefs? Can you give an example? I mean, we've seen the videos, but if anyone wants to speak to that, then you have to wave. Okay.
We are actually implementing a number of reef-positive initiatives. Some of them are they have a direct impact on the coral reef, and others are a bit more indirect. As I mentioned before, I think we all know what we need to do to protect reefs. Many of the MPA managers know what they need to protect reefs. They just need the money to do it. So what I'm going to tell you we're working on is nothing new, I think, to anybody who works in the coral reef field. You know, what we work on is making sure that MPA has the money so they can do the public education that they need to do, so they can go and talk to the farmers and the pig farmers, etc., and work out ways to deal with the outflow. So we can go and talk to everybody really and increase public awareness. We're looking at other things though. We're looking at ecotourism models, and this one might be a bit more indirect initially, but if we can build up that capacity of the MPA, it is financed initially with money from the Global Fund Coral Reef. We build it up to the area where it's actually able to generate sufficient income from ecotourism, then that money can then be used to carry out all of the other things we need to do in the MPA. The coral reef restoration, which is, yes, a plaster on the sore, but we're desperate and we need to do it at this point in time. The enforcement in one of our projects in Philippines, we're building up the enforcement of the Bante Dagat, for example, the community rangers. And I could go on, but a lot of them are ones that you already know.
Thank you very much. But also, just more specifically, and a question when I have both of you here as well, is how is the Global Fund for Coral Reef, we talked a lot about, you know, communities, involvement, development, but how is actually helping local community in terms of capacity building? Actually, I can see her on the line. I don't know where to look. You can see me, Chuck, and so yeah. Okay, great.
No, I can see you, Mina.
Yeah, great. Okay, so maybe you would anyone like to address the question how the Global Fund for Coral Reef is actually helping local communities or helping develop, but on looking at, for example, capacity building, technology. How is the fund helping that component?
So maybe, Mina, both on the grant and investment side, local capacity building is a critical element from the start. of these programs. And that's a combination of education, communication, about the importance of the reefs, but obviously the key to having the local partners, the convening agents, and the folks they're working with is to build that local capacity, work with local NGOs as well as the entrepreneurs who were profiled. And I think one of the key elements is to teach people here this holistic system. There is no one answer. It's going to be dealing with what in any ecosystem, we're going to have to hit them all. And so you're going to need to build capacity in each of the areas if we're going to succeed here.
Yeah, I think it actually also for the benefit here of the audience and how the fund works. So you represent and you talked about the investment window, just also that, you talked about partnership and you partnered with UNDP, UNEP, etc. to have this capacity building and under the grant system, I believe. Right? Chuck, did you want to add something or?
I did. When we designed the Global Fund for Coral Reef, we were very much focused on community-based natural resource management. And I think that's demonstrated through the strategic objectives of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. We have 4 strategic objectives. Of those 4 strategic objectives, 2 are specifically focused on communities. One is livelihoods and the other one is resilience. So we're looking to do everything we can, both to create employment, create economic growth that's sustainable, but then also very much focused on resilience and being able to make sure that communities are better able to withstand shocks and insecurity.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one final question because to kind of close the loop, because in the beginning you said that the Global Fund for Coral Reefs really was developed to close the conservation finance gap, specifically targeting coral reef. So do you think that the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, which was, the first one that was launched a year ago, do you think that's going to change the SDG 14 funding landscape? So I'll let you all comment on that. I'll leave you online a minute to think about it. So I'll go to Maria first. Is it going to change the SDG landscape?
I think it will. Because there are a few sources of private capital in the region, the target is 30 million for the region, and I think this can initiate and attract additional funding. So I definitely think it can change that landscape.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree. I can say nothing different because we're actually going to use the money that we get from the Global Fund Coral Reef to leverage more private investment for the projects that we're doing. So I would say definitely yes.
And Chuck and Craig?
Yeah, I would say that the Global Fund for Coral Reefs is the first UN trust fund that's dedicated to SDG 14. And it's also the first blended finance mechanism that's dedicated to life underwater. So I think that getting back to the idea of a demonstration fund, I think it's going to be, we're trying to prove out approaches in the context of the ocean that are going to be sustainable and that investments are going to be able to have impact, both generate financial returns, but then also have the biodiversity and also climate impact that we're seeking. So I do think that we have an opportunity to, through this demonstration fund approach, and then also learning what works, really focusing on scaling that globally. And I think that's where the real impact can take place.
Excellent, excellent. Craig, do you think it's going to...
Well, first, I think this is a great set of partners. I mean, as Chuck mentioned, the UN Trust Fund, various elements, folks at UNDP leading, and we've had strategy sessions, which are really just wonderful with how we're approaching things. GCF, Ambassador Thomson, thank you. We hopefully will be at the board and approved with our anchor investor in October. We're going to get some things right. Mostly, we have to get them right. We'll get some things wrong, as Chuck said. I think this is a pioneering effort. And I'd ask, my just final words would be, help us. We need everyone's help, and we have to get this right. And then this, I think, will be a breakthrough in financing oceans.
Thank you very much. So we are actually coming to the end of the session, but it's not really the end because they're going to have a drink reception, which unfortunately you cannot join us for. But I will let you just have if you could have a very, very last few words from you, Chuck, to close this panel. I'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Minna. I wanted to mention the fact that the World Conservation Congress, this Congress, has adopted Motion 122, which calls for all IUCCN members to support financing mechanisms for coral reef ecosystems, specifically with a view to achieving relevant global goals. So I think that this, as we meet in the Congress, I think it's important for all Congress partners to join us, and we're asking you to join us. I think, as Craig said, we're very fortunate to have the partners that we do. I wanted to extend special thanks to His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II, who's been such a leader in this area. We've been working with his foundation very closely. Also, the UN agencies have been invaluable, BNP Paribas, Pegasus, and Craig. I mean, thank you to all of these partners, and also the convening agents. And you heard from WCS and other convening agents. We really want to have a focus on the ground and working with local partners. We want to scale up proven approaches, but we want to do it in the local context. We want to do it on behalf of and for communities. So we're excited about this. And really what I'd like to close with is just asking you to help us, whether it's as a donor, as an implementing partner, as a thought leader, as an advocate. We need your help, and we want to make this successful. And I think together with the partners that we have and the new partners that we're hoping to attract, I think we're going to be successful.
Thank you very much for those excellent remarks. Innovative partnership is really key. So thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to thank you very much as well for joining us online. And we're sorry that you couldn't be here. And thank you very much. And we'll now ask everyone, when you finish, to put your headset on the chair, and they will know it. Sorry? Yeah. Well, before you put down your headset, we're going to run one final closing video. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you who have contributed to this inspiring discussion. It focused on how we can catalyze game-changing levels of finance towards the protection and restoration of our planet's priceless coral reefs. Such united efforts are more critical than ever. The effects of ocean warming and acidification are already visible across the globe due to climate change. As IUCN has highlighted, the current amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now too high for coral reefs to thrive. These reefs, which harbor the highest biodiversity of any ecosystem globally, will also suffer more frequent mass die-offs according to the IPCC's new report. As a result, many marine species could simply vanish. The decline of these incredible ecosystems is putting food provision, flood protection, and other services that corals provide at severe risk. And we know that without nature, at least half of the SDG targets could not be achieved. However, it is not too late to act. The Global Fund for Coral Reefs is unlocking the groundbreaking investments that will protect and revive ecosystems. And it is empowering local communities and enterprises that rely on reefs. In less than 1 year since its launch, the fund is already making substantial inroads. As we have heard today, look to Fiji, where we are helping to catalyze over 50 million in public and private sector funding towards coral reefs and local reef-positive enterprises. Dynamic new programs are taking root in 13 countries altogether. That includes the development of a Blue Economy regional program in the 4 countries of the Mesoamerican Reef: Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Belize. Stretching over 1,000 kilometers, this is the second largest reef system in the world. Our engagement will trigger positive change in an ecosystem that is home to over 900 species of fish, coral, mollusks, and marine mammals. We are also seeing a partnership that is growing in strength. In recent weeks, both the United Kingdom and France have joined our growing coalition that includes Germany, the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation, and the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. The United Nations Development Programme is immensely proud to be part of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. That has included our work to capitalize the fund and our support to develop the fund's strategy and theory of change. UNDP's on-the-ground presence in 101 coral reef countries enables us to provide direct support to initiatives financed by the fund, including in small island developing states and least developed countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with COP26 and CBD COP15 now on the horizon, we must foster not only a green but also a blue recovery from this devastating pandemic. To help achieve this goal, I would like to invite countries, private investors, financial institutions, and philanthropies to join the only global coalition that is working to unlock reef-positive investments. At this pivotal moment for people and planet, the Global Fund for Coral Reefs is driving forward the bold choices and cutting-edge investments that will alter the trajectory of coral reefs forever. In doing so, we can leave a lasting legacy for the next generation and the many generations to come. To all of you, I say thank you and look forward to working with you in the months and years to come.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming, and we now invite you. Thank you, Your Excellency, Serena, and we welcome you to the front. Thank you.
Oh, that was quick.